Hello, and welcome to the nutrition week of the Mission Ready Performance Challenge. Today we are talking all about nutrition. Nutrition can be a really big subject, and so I'm going to do my best to keep it not overwhelming and to keep it really practical. But as we go throughout today, try to pick out just a couple things that are going to be really applicable to you. Um, so stuff that we're going to go through today, we're going to talk about why does nutrition matter? How do we set ourselves up for success, for change? Um, what does our body really need when we're talking about nutrition? How do we take all that information to be able to build a healthy plate? How do we adapt our nutrition to our changing needs? So based around like exercise and stuff like that. How to choose higher quality foods. We're going to talk about how to hydrate, how much you should drink, as well as touch on sleep and nutrition at the very end there. So, why does nutrition matter? What we eat is impacted by or has a direct relationship with pretty much every aspect of our life. And so I think the one that we think about most often is our physical health. We think about it a lot when we're thinking about body composition, when we get blood work done, when we're like, oh man, I'm really low energy. We consume a lot of caffeine, right? We think about it and it's impacted by and like impacts our illnesses. Um, and so we think about our physical health a lot, but a lot of the things that we don't think about are how it impacts our mental and cognitive health. Our brains really thrive when we eat really nutritious and well balanced meals. Our nutrition can be tied with our emotional health in both ways. And so we want to make sure that we um, are taking care of that from an emotional standpoint. We even have a actual nervous system tie between our gut and our brain. Our nutrition is also tied to our relational and even our social health. Think about all the times that you meet up with people. Food is often central to how we connect with people. How many times do you go out for dinner with your family or with friends? When we meet with someone for a first date, a lot of times food is involved, right? And so it can be really central to those parts of our life. Our environmental health can impact and be impacted by our nutrition. So the environment that we live and operate in can help or hurt our nutritional choices. You have influence over your environmental health, over the nutritional choices that you make as well. It can even be tied to our existential and our purposeful health. Start to think about what you value for yourself. How you think about how you think about yourself is going to impact how you eat and the nutritional choices you make. The things that are important to you are going to impact what you choose to eat and how you choose to eat. Your faith background may have some religious or some nutritional uh, considerations as well. So, whether this nutrition information is familiar to you or maybe it's a lot, we just really hope that you guys are able to pick up at least one piece of information that helps you make an improvement in your nutrition uh, even this week. So, how do we move towards better nutrition? We're going to do that through developing skills. So, the skills that we're going to talk about today are how to plan, prioritize, and prepare, how to provide adequate nutrients, how to match our energy intake, the food that we eat, to our needs as well as our goals, how to choose higher quality foods more often, how much water we need to drink, and how to regulate our behaviors around eating. So, if eating were as simple as just a science, we would all eat a lot better more frequently. But it's not. It's much more about behaviors and creating systems that work for you than it is just choosing the right foods. So, the first skill we're going to talk about is how to plan, prioritize, and prepare to be able to eat well. So, how do we set ourselves up for success? We want to make sure that we root ourselves in our why, in our purpose, just like we talked about in goal setting. We want to make sure that we identify our top priorities in respect with our why, our purpose. With those priorities in mind, we want to make sure that we map out our day or our week. Where are we wasting time? Where is there extra time that we maybe didn't realize we had, even if it's just 15 minutes or so? And how do we plug in systems that work for us to make better choices into those gaps? We want to think about increasing our health and fitness activities to include nutrition related activities in small bites, pun intended. And so we want to make sure that we're not making this giant change at once, just like we talked about in the goal setting. We want to take small, achievable steps to move us closer to our larger goals. We're going to create systems that make health and fitness faster and easier. So think about things that help us to cook more nutritious meals, like meal prepping. If you're trying to go to the gym, we want to make sure that we're packing your gym bag the night before, picking things that are convenient and along the way. If you're really tempted to go out and stop at Wendy's every day on your way home, go a different way home. Make it less convenient to make the less healthy choice. Put things in your calendar. Uh, if you need to go grocery shopping, put it in your calendar. Get a routine with you if you live by yourself, or with your family, your spouse if you live with your family. Um, Take time to put meal prepping in your calendar. Meal prepping can take time, but if you do it smartly, it really can make your week much more efficient. If you struggle with remembering to eat, put reminders to eat in your calendar, whichever calendar you're going to see, put those reminders in there. And then at the end of each week, make sure that we're taking time to review, asking ourselves, hey, what went well this week? What got in my way this week? And how can I plan and prepare for that next week? So when we're thinking about defining our priorities, an analogy I like to use is a jar. Maybe some of you have seen this before. So if we think about a glass jar, like just your mason jar that maybe you have sitting in your kitchen, it has a finite amount of area in it, right? And if I am going to fill my jar and I want to fill as many rocks, pebbles, and sand into my jar as possible, I have to think about the order that I put those items into my jar. If you take your jar and you fill it up with a bunch of sand first, are you going to be able to fit in all those bigger rocks and pebbles? No. The sand takes up too much space. However, if I put the bigger rocks into my jar, the amount of time that I have first, then I can put the medium-sized pebbles in around, and then I can top it off with sand, and the sand forms all around those other things. And so that's how we want to think about our time. We want to put the big rocks, those things that are really important and that are most necessary to feel fulfilled in our life, in our jar first. So if family time is really important to you, we need to block off that time first. If earning a living is really important to you, I hope it is, we want to put that in our calendar first. If health habits are really important to you, we want to put those in our jar first. The next thing that we want to put into our jar around those things are going to be our pebbles. So these are going to be those things that add fun and satisfaction to your life, but they aren't totally necessary. They're things that really make our life better and that make us feel satisfied with what we're doing, but they aren't, if you miss them 1 week, it's not going to make a big difference. If you habitually miss them, they will. And then the last thing that we want to filter in to our time is our sand. And so these are going to be your bonus activities. So they can be enjoyable, but they're definitely not crucial to survival or even to fulfillment. So think about things like scrolling on social media. I know for some of you, playing video games is a bigger hobby and does bring satisfaction and fulfillment, but for me, that's not the case. So that's something that I sprinkle in every now and then, right? When I have the time. Everyone's priorities is going to look different, and that's okay. So what does this look like when we turn around to put it on our calendar? This is an exercise called time mapping. So you're going to take a blank Excel sheet. If you want a PDF instead, I've got one made that you can print off and write it in. Everybody's a little bit different. Some people prefer doing it on the computer. Others like to do it pen and paper. I'm a pen and paper gal. So we want to, first off, set in those things that are completely out of our control. So most of the time that's going to be your work schedule, especially for you guys, right? So Make sure that you're blocking that off on there. You can't control that. We can maybe control some of the shorter breaks in there, but we can't control the primary time that you're at work. The next thing that we want to put on our calendar are those big rock items. What are those things, the minimum requirements to provide for you and your family and to maintain health and fulfillment? So, sleep should be on there. Yes, block off your sleep. If family time is really important to you, block those off. If fitness is really important to you, block those off. Whatever is in that big rock category for you, block those off first. After that, we want to think about what types of things add value to your life. So maybe you have a mindfulness practice that really adds a lot of value for you. You're going to block off time for that in your calendar, regardless of how long that is. Maybe you have a hobby that is really life-giving to you. Block off time for that hobby. And then lastly, we're going to add in those things. And you don't even really have to add them to the calendar, but just know that those are the kind of the times that you have to filter those things in that you enjoy, but they're not necessary. So that social media time, stuff like that. Once you've kind of got some of those things blocked off on the calendar, that's going to help you see where are those gaps to be able to plug in things like meal prepping if you haven't already accounted for them in your health requirements. But as you look at your calendar, it's going to help you know what type of meals can you slide into each place, what type of meals do you need. Um, if you've got a really long day, like you might need to plan some snacks for that day. If you have a shorter day, maybe you have time to, you don't need to meal prep as much because you're going to have time to come home and fix a meal. Look at your calendar to figure out what type of meals you need and to think about what type of meal prep you need. So some examples of that is if I'm working a 6 to 2 shift, I know that in the morning I'm not going to have a ton of time to make a breakfast, but I do have time for something that is quick or pre-made. So maybe over the weekend I made some little egg muffin cup things or some breakfast sandwiches that I was able to put in the freezer or the fridge and I can just warm them up in the morning. Something like overnight oats. You can prep the night before and just grab it out of the fridge in the morning. Smoothies are pretty quick in the morning, um, especially if you have like one of the blender cups. It makes it really fast. During my shift, I'm going to need either a sack lunch or some sort of snack with a balance of protein, carbs, and healthy fats to help get me through the day. So I'm going to need to make sure that I've either prepped those the night before or that I've had time to do that morning. In the evening, I need to have a meal prepped meal, especially if you live by yourself or your spouse doesn't do the cooking. It's good to have something that's prepped ahead of time, especially if you have a lot of family things going on and that's not something that you're doing together as a family. Um, so things like rice cookers have timers that make it really easy to pop it on as soon as you get home, and then you can have it ready when you need it. Crock pots can be similar. You can even start those in the morning. Sheet pan meals can be in the oven, can be really helpful, especially if you have all the veggies and ingredients chopped up beforehand. And then in the evening is also a really great time to pack lunches for the next day. Our next skill is to think about how we provide adequate nutrients. So for that, we're going to talk about what nutrients do we actually need. So what do our bodies need? We need protein. So protein gets a lot of hype and you can go to the grocery store and every aisle has something that's like this many grams of protein added, protein, right? It's really hot right now. And for good reason. But we want to make sure that we are getting protein from food as much as we can. So why is protein important? Protein, when we eat it, our digestive system breaks it down into amino acids. And so amino acids are building blocks for all sorts of things throughout our body, pretty much everything throughout our body, which is why protein intake is so important. So amino acids are vital for synthesizing muscle proteins, skeletal and connective tissues, neurotransmitters, so helping our nervous system fire, enzymes, immune system chemicals, transport proteins, and much, much more. Protein, specifically amino acids, are essential for repairing and building our brain cells. Some of those amino acids are precursors to transmitters that help our brain communicate. Uh, Protein intake is linked to improved cognitive performance, and it boosts executive function and working memory. So it's super important for our body, but also super important for our brain, which I think we don't think about very often. Our bodies really thrive when we eat diverse proteins. So if all you eat is chicken, you're not getting diverse proteins. We want to make sure that we're eating a large variety of plants as well as poultry. You can include some red meat. Some people opt not to include red meat, and that's okay. But we want to make sure that we're getting protein from different sources so that we are fulfilling all the amino acids that our body needs. Uh, Different foods have different types of amino acids. So we want to make sure that we're prioritizing from food first. If you are a plant-based eater or are thinking about shifting towards plant-based eating, whether that's a truly just more plant-heavy or you're looking at going vegan or vegetarian, some considerations to think about. Uh, Make sure that you're including at least 1 cup of beans or legumes each day. These are going to be really important for providing lysine, which is an amino acid. It's really hard to get from other plant sources, and so making sure that you're including that is going to be really important for providing that amino acid balance for your body. Especially for anyone, but especially for plant eaters, you need as much variety as possible so that you're getting the full amino acid uh, like all of them. And so there are ones that our body makes, there are ones that our body doesn't make. The ones that our body doesn't make are called essential amino acids. And so you want to make sure that you're getting as much of those from food as possible, and you get that by eating a large diversity of food. Um, Try to avoid building your diet around cereals, grains, and processed foods. If you are a plant-based eater, you are missing the boat if that's what your diet is centered around. There's a lot of nutrients that your body's not getting if those are the main things that you're feeding your body. And if you are having a really hard time meeting your overall protein needs, which we're going to talk about in the next slide, or you're just taking in less energy in general, like your total calorie count is too low, you might need to consider a plant-based protein supplement um, to help fill that gap a little bit. So how much protein do we actually need? Should we just be pumping all sorts of protein that's processed from other foods into our body? Well, we can do some math based on our body weight. So recommendations are going to be based off of how much you weigh. Within the literature, they're going to do it within kilograms. Um, for your reference, 1 kilogram is 2.2 pounds. So take your body weight, divide it by 2.2. And then you're going to multiply it by these reference numbers here on the graph to help figure out what protein intake is good for you. So if we are someone who is just trying to prevent malnutrition, this should be the very low end of your protein intake. So if you're below this, we want to make sure that we are increasing that protein intake so that we're providing the very baseline needs for our body. So if you're below 0.8 grams per kilogram of body weight of protein each day, you need to increase your protein. You're not providing enough for your body just to cover primary functions. If you are someone who is primarily sedentary, you don't exercise, you do a lot of sitting, in general, your step count is probably going to be below 5,000 each day. An adequate amount of protein is 0.8 to 1.2 grams per kilogram of body weight per day. However, more recent research is showing that 1.2 grams per kilogram is probably a more appropriate minimum. The more research that we are doing now, the more that we're finding how important protein is and how deficient people are in protein. So we want to make sure that we're shooting for that 1.2 if we can. Adequate protein intake for someone who is active but overweight or obese is going to be between that 1.2 and 1.6 grams per kilogram. Adequate protein intake for someone who is active with a healthy body weight or body composition is going to be 1.6 to 2.2. That 2.2 is going to be right at 1 gram per pound of body weight, which is what you'll see recommended a lot of times kind of out on social media. High protein intake is going to be for those individuals who are healthy, but who are looking to change their weight or their body composition. So, like you're trying to put on a lot more muscle, and you're doing a lot of strength training, and you have no other health concerns. So, for those type of goals, you want to be eating between 1.6 and 3.3 grams per kilogram per day. 3.3 is very high. Props to you if you can actually achieve that. That's a lot of protein. Um, but in general, for most people, 1 gram per pound is a good target, especially if you're someone who is active. Um, Another recommendation that I've seen out there is 1 gram per pound of lean body mass. So if you've come and done an InBody, which all of you have, if you're in the MRPC, um, lean body mass is at the top of your InBody report. And so that's your body weight minus all the body fat. And so if you look at 1 gram per pound of that lean body mass, or lean mass, that can be a really great guideline as well. So what else does our body need? Our body needs carbohydrates. Yes, we do need carbs. So carbohydrates are our primary fuel source for brain function, which is why a lot of times people who go really hardcore keto for a long time will sometimes get like brain fuzzy, or have a hard time focusing, and why they get moody in those first little bit of crossing over into keto. Um, and so it's really important for brain function as well as for activity. Higher intensity exercise is going to thrive off of carbs. Um, just for reference, our brains need about 130 grams of glucose or carbohydrates per day to be able to function. However, the quality of those carbs is going to matter when we're thinking about our total amount of carbs. So I'll touch on that here in a second. When we're thinking about sheer volume of carbohydrates in our diet, for most people, around 30% at a minimum of your daily calories are going to be carbohydrates. So just for reference, 1 gram of carbohydrate is going to be about 4 calories. Same for protein. Fat will be different. Um, but for most people, about a 33% split between protein, carbs, and uh, your fats are going to be a pretty even split if you're tracking your macros. Um, and so, uh, but your carbohydrates will vary widely based on your activity. So, for someone who is training really hard a lot, they may be upwards of 55% of their total calorie intake being carbs. But for most individuals, for just day to day, 30-ish percent is going to be a good place to target. When we think about the quality of carbs, we want to make sure that we're including lots of fiber. So when we think about carbohydrate sources, which we're going to talk about sources of all these here in a second, um, are carbohydrates that look more like a grain or like your starchy vegetables, are going to have much higher amounts of fiber. Fruit has a ton of fiber and is going to provide a lot of carbs for your system. So the higher the fiber intake, the better. The minimal recommended intake for fiber for adults is 25 grams per day, which is actually kind of low. When we start thinking about optimal intake, for women, 35 grams per day is considered optimal, and 48 grams per day is considered optimal for men. When we look at an average diet, in the United States, the average dietary fiber intake is between 15 and 17 grams per day. So we are about slicing in half what is optimal for our bodies with a typical American diet. When we're thinking about carbohydrates and our brain, the quality really matters. So when we eat simple carbs, so think things like processed sugars, white breads, things that come in packages that are not whole grain, that have high amounts of carbs on that nutrition label, those are going to be increased with, or they're going to be associated, linked with decreased global cognition. Complex carbs, on the other hand, so think about things that don't give you that quick hit of energy, but are that slow release. They've got really high fiber. They're probably more plant-based, um, and look like the grains, or the vegetable that they're coming from, or fruits. Those carbs are going to be associated with better brain aging, and that's been shown in studies over and over. When we are thinking about a vegan or vegetarian plant-based diet, we want to make sure that we're prioritizing carbohydrates that are also protein rich in that are also protein rich when we're selecting those carb sources, which I've got some of those highlighted later. So, next thing our body needs is fats. So this is our last macronutrient. Macronutrient is just like that bigger thing that we need. So fats are going to be important for our immune health, our brain health, our hormone function, and our reproductive health. Some of you grew up in a bit of the 90s and you remember the low fat craze. And so if we are consistently bringing in too little fat, uh, we are more prone to sickness and injury, because fat helps to build all of these really great membranes, um, and different things that help our body just function really smoothly. So, when we are thinking about our fat intake, we want to make sure that we're including healthy fats, like monosaturated fats, as well as omega 3s. Some of you may take an omega 3 supplement. They are very well researched. Quality matters, so check out your supplements. But those two fats in particular, monosaturated and omega 3s, help to build and maintain the structure of our brain cell membrane. So they help with the functioning of our brain, as well as the protection of our brain. Adequate fat intake is linked to better cognitive function, as well as reduced risk of cognitive decline. For most individuals, total calories are going to include about 25 to 35% of calories from fat. And fat is going to be much more calorically dense than our proteins and our carbs. So proteins and carbs, 1 gram of protein and carb is equal to about 4 calories. For fat, 1 gram of fat is equal to 9 calories. So much more calorically dense, which is why servings for fat look much smaller than servings for carbs and proteins. When we're looking at calorically equivalent. But that's what we're looking for. And then the last thing is actually a really broad category, is going to be macronutrients. So macronutrients are your vitamins and minerals. The best way to get macronutrients are by consuming varied vegetables, fruits, and plants, to make sure that we're getting all those vitamins and minerals that your body needs. These micronutrients are important for providing antioxidants, so things that are going to help us stay much healthier. They're going to help with DNA repair. They help fight bacteria, viruses, and other pathogens, so they help us when we're sick. They help lower inflammation, which comes with all sorts of stress, both physical and mental stress. Uh, they can help actually inhibit fat synthesis and storage, so they help maintain a healthy body composition. They help to lower risk of heart disease, support healthy brain function, as so many more things. And so the best way to get those micronutrients, again, is to consume as many fruits and veggies and plants as possible. The different colors are representative of different types of micronutrients. So when we tell kiddos, like, hey, make sure you're eating the rainbow, put all the different colors on your plate, adults should follow that rule too. So make sure when you're making your meals, you have multiple colors on your plate. So how do we take all of that information about what our body needs, protein, carbs, fats, and micros, and help to build a healthy plate. Number one, we want to pick a protein source. We need protein in all meals and snacks because we don't store it in our bodies. Ideally, we're picking lean proteins. And so by lean proteins, I mean ones that are lower in fat. In general, we want to shoot for 10 plus grams of protein per meal or snack. If you're eating a full meal, ideally over 20 grams. We'll talk about portioning later. Um, but that's kind of what we want to shoot for. You can also take your daily protein needs and divide it by the number of meals and or snacks you plan to eat in the day. So, what are some healthy protein sources? I would recommend screenshotting that, taking a pause and screenshotting this. The bolded protein sources in the Eat More tile are ones that are higher in protein. So those are going to be ones that are a priority for vegans and vegetarians or people who are opting for more plant-based meals. Um, edamame, tempeh, and tofu are going to be good ones for like main sources of protein. If you don't have one of those three, that's when you really need to prioritize including lentils, beans, things like split peas, black-eyed peas. Their protein is not as high as the three above it, but they are higher for a plant-based protein. So when we look at the Eat More, it's going to be those lean cuts of meats primarily. You're going to have some dairy sources in there as well, but they're going to be ones that are pretty high in protein amounts. The Eat Some are going to be things that are a little bit more convenient most of the time, or that have slightly higher fat for some of those. And so they are good to include sometimes, but we maybe don't want to eat them all the time. Eat less are going to be those indulgence foods, and we're going to talk more about the continuum of foods later. But those are going to be things that we aren't choosing to eat super often. I do want to point out that with the plant-based and vegan, vegetarian diets, be really hesitant about some of the store-bought uh, veggie burgers. A lot of those are really packed with a bunch of gunk. So make sure that if you're going to do those, try to, there's some really great recipes to make your own at home. So doing DIY black bean or veggie burgers can be a really great. And then we want to kind of avoid those processed plant-based meats. They are not always great. Our step two after picking a protein source is going to be including a vegetable or multiple vegetables. These are going to be really important for providing fiber as well as water content. They're going to aid in regulating your cholesterol levels and your hormone levels. So making sure that we have plenty of veggies in our diet is really helpful. They're going to help again with the antioxidants and the inflammations, keeping our body healthy and functioning properly. And as I mentioned before, the different colors have different micronutrients. So put colors on your plate, make your plate really colorful. All veggies are good. No, eat more, eat some, eat less. Our next step to building a great plate after our veggies are going to be choosing a carb. So these are going to help to provide the energy for our exercise and activity. They're important for our brain function. But with most things, less processed is best. So when we are thinking about our carbohydrate sources, those ones with extra protein in them naturally are bolded. And so we want to make sure that whether you're a vegan or a vegetarian, those are really helpful to sneak in some extra protein if you're having a hard time meeting your protein goals. Um, and so you can see that the ones in the Eat More are going to be those ones that are really plant forward. They look like the plants that they came from primarily. The Eat Some are going to be ones that are maybe slightly processed. Like I'm looking at some of the pastas in there that are from a plant-based. They've been processed into a pasta. but so they're convenient, but not something that we want to make our primary carb source. And then your eat less are going to be those things that are either lots of sugar added or they have a lot of fat in them, more processed or just like straight sugar. Not that including things like honey or molasses, stuff like that are bad. They're fine to include sometimes, but we want to make sure that we're not overdoing them because they're a natural product. Our fourth step is going to be adding fat for flavor. Fats are really good at helping us add flavor. So our body needs fats. We don't want to exclude them. Um, and again, they're helpful for the immune function, for hormones, for brain health. They really help food taste better. They help us because of their caloric density. They help to improve satiety, and because they're calorically dense. So when we're thinking about high quality to low quality oils, the oils that are in the Eat More are in the Eat More because of how they're processed. Um, the ones in the Eat Less are typically like cooled and heated and cooled, and it changes their chemical structure to make them like super not healthy for our body. Um, and so that's why they're down there, and the others are up top. Um, and so nuts and seeds are also going to be in the Eat More. Eggs can be a really great, healthy, fat content food for us, as well as like olives. Um, some of those, especially the nuts and seeds, are going to have some protein in them as well. Eat some, again, are going to be those more convenient things that have some fat in them, but are maybe a good treat to include or something that we can just kind of easy grab and go. And then our last step is going to be being able to adjust our plate. So different goals and activity levels are going to have different nutritional needs. So in general, when you're more active, you want to increase your carb intake, not like crazy, don't like double it, but you want to increase that a little bit more. If you're a little bit more active, have a little bit more carbs. If you're a lot bit more, then that's when you can grow it. We're going to talk about some of that here coming up. If you have a goal of weight loss or you are just generally less active, vegetables, 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 vegetables. You need those. They're going to help you feel full because of the amount of fiber that you're going to get from them, but they're going to provide all of the nutrients that your body needs. For both weight loss and for lean muscle mass increases, we want to increase protein. Protein helps us to have an ideal body composition. It's protective. Um, Most people who are underactive are either eating all protein or not near enough protein. So we want to make sure that we're eating the adequate amounts within the amount that you calculated when we were on the protein slides. If you are changing your dietary intake um, for weight loss or weight gain, in general, you want to move your total calories up or down by about 500 calories at a time. So if your goal is to put on muscle mass, bump it up 500 calories at a time, and you want a good portion of those coming from protein. If you're trying to lose weight, try to maintain your protein, but move your total calories down. Most of the time, that's going to be a reduction in carbs or fats. So our next skill is how to match our energy intake to our needs and goals. And so we're going to talk about how to monitor and adjust our intake and output. So the big question, should I be tracking macros? Well, it's not a simple yes or no. It's a maybe, but maybe no. So tracking can be really helpful to help bring awareness to what and how much we're eating. Um, it can be really helpful to help retrain your body how to eat intuitively. A lot of times we forget how to listen to hunger cues, and so then we'll be hungry, and our body's trying to tell us we're hungry, and we don't even realize it. Or we'll be stuffing our face, and our body's trying to tell us, "Hey, I'm full," and we just kind of keep stuffing until we're like, "Oh my gosh, Thanksgiving table belly," right? Um, And so tracking your macros can kind of help realign your body to what your body actually needs, and that can take time. It's kind of a way to earn the way to eat intuitively. On the flip side, having a general awareness of your caloric and macronutrient needs can be really a good thing. So doing some kind of general tracking can be helpful. But a lot of times we do this out of context. We are trying to track calories, but we're not really doing it wholeheartedly. And so then it's really not helping us, and we end up either overeating or underreporting our activity. And so then it really doesn't help us. Um, Accurately tracking food intake is time consuming. So if you're going to give it a go, um, you got to commit to it. Most of the time, even bodybuilders who are like super, super strict about their nutrition are only doing this for short periods of time leading up to their competition. They're just kind of in the ballpark for the rest of those. So who should count calories and macros? If you genuinely enjoy it, and you don't feel like a compulsive need to track or monitor your food, go for it. If you are curious about your food intake and want to take a deep dive to take a closer look, go for it, even if it's just a short time. I actually really highly recommend it for, pick a week to 2 weeks, even a month. And I'll do this for myself periodically. I'll track for a little bit, and then I will take a long break. And then if something changes in my life, I will track again just to kind of help recenter myself. Um, if you want help doing that, reach out. You really need to be able to weigh food to do it properly and to be pretty strict to really gain a lot of benefit out of it. And then the last group of people who should absolutely count their macros is if you're paid for your physique, or some high level athletes and weight class athletes. When your nutrition can make or break your paycheck, or that championship title, then absolutely you should be tracking macros like it's your job. But on the other hand, if you're like, that sounds too complicated, I don't know if I can stick with it or I can do it well, it doesn't have to be complicated. A lot of times, close enough is good enough. Calorie labels are unfortunately not as accurate as we would like to believe. They can be off upwards of 20%. Um, we stink at accurately reporting portions. To really get an accurate uh, reporting of your nutrition, you really need to weigh all of your food. It's not good enough to like say like, oh, I ate a cup of chicken. It really needs to be either in grams or ounces to be able to have adequate tracking. So a couple other methods that we're going to touch on um, are things that you can do to kind of estimate your portion sizes and to help guide your portion sizes. So the plate method we're going to go over is you're going to use your plate, your circle plate, to guesstimate your macro percentage. So we'll say like this much of your plate needs to be protein, this much needs to be veggies. The little kid plates with the different dividers in them, or like meal prep containers can be really great for this because they help you kind of divvy up your plate. If you want to track for yourself, or you're working with a registered dietitian or a nutrition coach, taking pictures of your plate can be helpful. The pros of the plate method is that it's really easy to do. You just kind of look at your plate and take your best guess. The cons are that it is really hard to think about your whole day or your week um, when you're thinking about one plate at a time. Mixed foods can be really hard. So like think about like lasagna, right? There's a lot of things in there together, or like a casserole. And it's dependent on your plate size. So if you have a really big plate, you're probably going to overeat. If you have a really small plate, that may be the right amount, or it may be under what you need. Another method that we're going to touch on is hand portions. This is one that I use a kind of a combination of the two for myself personally. Our hands are nice because they help us to understand appropriate portion sizes because they are proportional to you. Um, so that is really helpful. So your hand is always with you, so you always have your measuring tool. It's proportional to you. Generally, bigger people have bigger hands. Smaller people have smaller hands. Yes, some of us have thicker or smaller or thinner hands, but in general, it's kind of proportioned to your build. We don't often have people who are like really thin but have really like puffy hands. So it's a good tool that's individualized. Um, and it's much easier to have servings per meal or day goals. So with the plate, you're kind of thinking about each plate individually. With your hand portions, you can kind of tick off like, okay, I need 6 hand servings of protein in a day. And so you can tick those off, and however they fit into your meals is how they fit into your meals. You can even expand that out to the week, right? It makes it a little bit easier to check the box on those from a longer term period instead of just one meal period. The cons, same as the plate, mixed foods are really hard. It's, you can't hold up your casserole dish and be like, how many thumbs of fat are in this? It's hard to visualize that. And so the other con is that food is not shaped by like your hands. We kind of have to use our imagination a little bit and get kind of close enough. So, how to use the plates. Um, these plates are on the United States Olympic Training website. Fun fact, some of uh, my grad friends from grad school actually helped create these with the Olympic Training Center. So here in Colorado Springs. So they are an excellent resource that I've used a lot. But so the Easy Training Plate is a really great plate also for weight management, so for weight loss. In general, if you are walking less than 5 to 7,000 steps per day, this is going to be the plate that you want to shoot for. When we're using this plate, at least half of your plate should be made up of fruits and vegetables. Those veggies can be raw or cooked. You can even include like a vegetable-based soup. Fresh fruits are going to fall into there. About a quarter to 1/3 of your plate is going to be lean protein. You're going to lean towards that 1/3 of your plate if you're going for the weight management. 1/4 if it's just an easy training day and you're usually pretty active. And then that last quarter to 1/6 of your plate is going to be whole grains and that kind of carb source. So your 1/6 if you're shooting for the weight management, so less carbs for weight management, the 1/4 if it's just an easy training day and you regularly train. Plate number 2 is going to be a moderate training day or a day where you do a little bit more activity. So this is going to be those types of days where you have about 7 to 10,000 steps in a day. You want, again, about a quarter of your plate to be lean proteins, which leaves the rest of the plate to be split in half, which would be 3/8, to be vegetables and fruits. And then the other 3/8 is going to be your whole grains. And then a hard training day or like a race day, if you're a runner, this is going to be those days where you are hitting over 10,000 steps per day, or you have multiple hard workouts or trainings in a day, or you're doing a really high intensity competition. 1/4 of your plate is going to be the vegetables and fruit. 1/4 of your plate is going to be the lean protein. And then 1/2 of your plate, this is where we get to eat our carbs, is going to be those whole grains. We still want to focus on a really high quality grain as much as we can. You might use some of those faster grains or like fruit around your exercise for some quick energy. But in general, when you're eating like a full meal, you want half of your plate to be those kind of complex carbs. So that is the plate method. The other method that we talked about is the hand portion sizing. So again, the hand portions are convenient because your hand's always with you. It's proportional to you. You have to use your imagination a little bit. So if you hold up your hand and you look at your palm, we are looking at both the surface area of your palm as well as like the thickness of your palm. So one serving of protein is going to be about the size of your palm. In general, women 1 to 2 per meal. Most of the time, men are going to need 2 per meal. For about 4 to 6 men, probably 5 to 8 palms of protein per day, which I know is kind of a funky way when you're first hearing it to think about it, but it works better than you think. Just when you're getting your plate, kind of look at your hand, look at your serving of protein, and kind of try to get 1 to 2 of those per meal. If you're having a hard time eating that much protein in one meal, that's where snacks are really helpful. Um, for your veggies, which is how we're going to get a lot of our micronutrients, we're going to look at our fist. So when you compare the amount of vegetables on your plate to your fist, women, you want 1 to 2, lean towards 2 if you can, men, at least 2 in general per meal. Veggies are really hard to overdo because they're pretty filling. Carbs is going to be that cupped handful. So if you think about taking your hand and scooping up your carbs, we want 1 to 2 of those per meal. If you're trying to lose weight, 1. If you are trying to increase weight, that's where you can do 2. And then fat, we're looking at like the volume of our thumb. This is probably the hardest one to imagine. A lot of times, if you're like cooking with oils, or you're including cheese and stuff on stuff, you're getting at least as much fat as you need, if not more. And so a lot of times we don't need to like add a ton unless you're really good at getting in your protein and your veggies. But in general, you want 1 to 2 thumbs per meal. Again, women kind of towards that 1, men towards the 2. If you're a really small framed male, you may need 1, and vice versa. If you're a larger framed woman, you might need the 2. So we've talked about what nutrients we need, and we've talked about how to build a good plate. We've talked about some portion sizes. So now we're going to talk about how to look at choosing higher quality foods. So how do we improve our food quality? It's important to recognize that all food has value and provides energy. Right now, I think, especially in the social media circles, there is a lot of like food hate. Um, and so making sure that you recognize that like food has value. It all provides energy. And if that food is important to you culturally, or like you just had a really stressful day and you need to eat some ice cream, like as long as we're not doing that all the time and that's not the only thing that you're eating, we can work with that. We can work around that. You didn't like ruin your diet because you ate something that was less nutritious for you. So recognize the food for the value that it has. Make the educated choice of choosing a more or less nutritious food based on the value that it has for you in that moment. And ideally, we're choosing the foods that have more nutritional value for us in long term more consistently. So everything has value, but there is a continuum of foods that is more or less nutritious for us. So instead of thinking of foods as good versus bad in this very black and white thinking, we want to think about how nutritious the food is for us. By thinking about foods on a continuum of eat more, eat some, eat less, or of like really great for us to less nutritious for us. Um, Thinking about it on that continuum instead of black and white helps us to make healthier choices that are more sustainable and to avoid unhealthy mental states around food. So kind of at the bottom end of nutrition value are going to be foods that are less healthy. They don't have very great nutritional value for you, but maybe you enjoy indulging in them. Kind of that middle section are going to be foods that are maybe more convenient, that have slightly better nutritional value, but are still usually somewhat processed to make them a little bit faster, or maybe you enjoy them a little bit more. And then foods at the top of that continuum are going to be foods that are really great for you, that you know you already like, or that you might like to try. So this is how those lists within the protein, carbs, and fats were organized. The eat more are those foods that are really great for you. The eat some are those ones in the middle that are probably a little more convenient, but slightly less nutritious. And then the eat less are those foods that are more indulgence foods. We don't want to rely on them all the time, but they do have value. So when we think about improving our food quality, we want to think about what are the things that we get to add to our diet instead of what we have to take away or replace. I think a lot of times when we think about weight loss or improving our diet, we're like, oh man, I can't eat this anymore. So instead of thinking about what we can't eat, think about all the things that you get to try or that you get to add that are really great for you and that are adding value to your body. So what is a food that you already eat? Think about what one step closer to less processed would look like towards that green category, the eat more. And what foods have you been curious about that were maybe in those green categories that you haven't uh, tried yet? So when we're thinking about levels of processing, it's important to help recognize how processed something is. So, kind of the example within the photos I have here is on the left-hand side, you've got a banana. Um, a no processed banana would be something that like not even farmers would touch. It just grew naturally, right? It looks just as nature gave it to us. A low level of processing would be something that's processed for safety, or maybe they're already pre-cut, but they didn't do anything to the food itself. Maybe something was flash frozen, so the nutritional value isn't changed. It looks like the food itself. It looks like nature gave it to us primarily. It's maybe just cut up differently or something for low processing. Moderate processing is going to be something like the middle, where maybe we have a banana smoothie. It's included with some other ingredients. Sometimes cutting up or like blending things will change the nutritional value. Sometimes it makes things more or less bioavailable, but in general, like the elements of the food itself are still there. And so a lot of times the something that's moderately processed is going to be blended, soaked. Maybe it had something added to it. Something that's high processed is going to be like the banana bread on the right hand side. And so there's a lot of ingredients added, there's potentially preservatives, and it's very different from how nature gave it to us. We've had to do a lot to that food to get it to that state. Something that's ultra processed, and I couldn't think of an example for a banana. I guess you could do like a, I don't know if Hostess makes a banana cake, but that would be an example if they did. It's going to be something that's engineered to make you want to eat more of it. And so a lot of times it's going to include uh, ingredients that you don't recognize as like a natural ingredient. It's got like a chemical name. Um, and it's not going to be found anything like that in nature in that form. So, what does this look like if we take a trip to Starbucks? First thing that we want to look at when we're thinking about levels of processing and how healthy something is the number of ingredients. So I pulled up 3 different random drinks from Starbucks based on some processing levels. So on the far left, we've got a flavored Frappuccino. In the middle, we've got just a basic blonde vanilla latte. And on the right-hand side, we've got a cafe misto. So when we look at the number of ingredients, that Frappuccino has 33 ingredients. The latte has 7, and the cafe misto only has 2. So when we think about overall just complexity of that item, the number of ingredients matters. We want to favor something that has fewer ingredients most often. If you look at the types of ingredients as well, you'll see some ingredients probably jump out to you on that Frappuccino side that are things that you maybe don't recognize or things that they had to intentionally pull out from something else to stick them into that. So, like I'm looking at, oh, what's a good example here? Like potassium sorbate. So while that is not necessarily like a lab created thing, they had to intentionally like figure out how to get that to be able to put it as an ingredient. If we look at the nutritional panel for each of these drinks, the first thing that you should pay attention to is the sheer amount of calories. So that Frappuccino beverage has almost 500 calories compared to the Cafe Misto on the far right, has 110 calories. So when we compare that Frappuccino to the latte, it has almost 2 times the calories and almost 2 times the amount of sugars as that vanilla latte. When we compare it to the Cafe Misto, we're looking at over 4 times the amount of calories and 6 times the sugar. Just for reference, I thought that this was kind of a fun comparison. 60 grams of sugar is equal to 30 Sour Patch Kids. One serving of Sour Patch Kids is about 12 of the like normal sized ones. So that Frappuccino has the equivalent of 30 Sour Patch Kids of sugar in it. The latte has about 18 Sour Patch Kids worth of sugar in it. And when we compare that latte to the Cafe Misto, um, we're looking at over 2 times the calories and over 3 times the sugars. The Cafe Misto has 10 grams of sugar, which is the equivalent of about 5 Sour Patch Kids. And most of that is coming from the milk in there. When we look at the breakdown of how the protein, carbs, and fat play out, um, for that Frappuccino, we see that carbs, the orange wedge, takes up a huge amount of space on the pie graph. The fat is also quite high, especially when we're considering how many total calories that we have, and that protein wedge is very small. As we move to the vanilla latte, the carbs are still pretty high. That's actually a higher percentage than it is in the Frappuccino, but the fat is much lower and the protein is much higher. So that makes that a better choice than the Frappuccino if you're wanting something that's a little bit sweet. But then that Cafe Misto has a much better split of protein, fat, and carbs. It's not quite a 33% split, but it's much closer to that, which is just going to be a better balanced thing if you are looking for that cafe. I know obviously they taste different. Sometimes you really want that sweet thing. And so the idea here is not to say never order that Frappuccino, but it's to say if you're going to order that Frappuccino, know what you need to prioritize in your other meals and snacks throughout the day to be able to make that a worth it choice. A lot of times, convenient foods kind of get a bad rap, especially on social media right now. There's a lot of hate over anything that's processed any way. But it's important to recognize that convenience foods are not always less healthy. Convenience food is not always equivalent with junk food. So make sure that as you're considering how to plus up your foods, choose the step forward that you will take. If if your step forward is you don't eat broccoli at all, and the only way that you're willing to eat broccoli is if it's sauteed in too much butter, like take that step and we'll clean it up later. Let's take the first step first, and we'll take more steps later, right? So if you will eat it because it's a convenient choice because you can pop it in the microwave or because of how it tastes, or something like that, like take that step. We can take more steps later, but take that step to include the veggies or the fruits into your diet first. Frozen fruits and vegetables still provide the same nutrients. Sometimes vegetables are blanched and it changes it a little bit, but for the most part, it really doesn't change the nutritional makeup, and frozen vegetables and fruits are super convenient. Fruits for smoothies and stuff like that. A lot of times, frozen fruit can actually be more nutritious than out of season fresh fruits because frozen fruits are frozen at their peak ripeness. So, a lot of times with fruit, their nutritional value is higher than what you can buy in the produce section when they're out of season. For vegetables, they're super convenient we keep a giant bag of broccoli in our freezer at all times. And so it's just a really convenient way to add those veggies throughout meals to make sure that we always have something colorful on our plate. Another example of a convenience food is rotisserie chickens. They're ready to eat. You can grab them from the grocery store. They're hot and ready. They're pre-seasoned. They have a good source of protein, and they're generally pretty cost effective. And then, especially as you're looking at plussing up your stuff, if you really struggle with veggies, experiment with different cooking styles. It is amazing how different foods can taste when you cook them differently. It can change nutrient availability, but again, if the option is eating broccoli versus not eating broccoli, I'd rather you cook it in a way that diminishes the nutrient availability just a little bit, and still eat broccoli. So, vegetable is better than no vegetable. Uh, play with things like roasting them, steaming them, eating them raw. If you need to dip them in ranch, do what you need to do to start integrating them. Again, we can take the next step later. If you're roasting them, steaming them, that type of thing, try different herbs and spices that can make vegetables really tasty and give you some variety as you're cooking things as well. So our next skill is to drink plenty of water. So we're going to talk about how much do you need and as well as how to make it convenient. So some quick hydration points. Yes, the pee test is a really helpful tool. So when you use the restroom, recognize that if you are going into a toilet that holds water and not a urinal, that the water in the toilet bowl is going to dilute your urine color a little bit. Your urine is going to be darker than what you see in the toilet bowl. So in general, your urine should be about a 1 or 2 on the hydration scale to the right there. That's where we kind of want to live. If you are thirsty, you are already dehydrated, and you need to drink water throughout the day. If your urine is at that 4 or above, you gotta go drink water. You are already dehydrated. However, if you are very good at drinking water, consuming only water can also lead to hyponatremia, which actually means that you're like over diluting your body too much. And so we need to make sure that we're including electrolytes throughout the day if you're doing that so that you aren't over hydrating. But for most people, that's not the case. We're going to talk about how much water you need on this slide. So, the way to best calculate your hydration needs. So within literature, 30 to 40 milliliters per kilogram of body weight is going to be your ideal amount of water. I recognize that most of us don't deal with milliliters or kilograms, so a good goal to shoot for that is about the equivalent is half of your body weight in pounds in ounces of water. So I created a nifty little table for you. Feel free to screenshot. Find your weight. I did it in 25-pound increments, and then over on the right hand side, you've got your ranges in liters as well as ounces based on the 30 to 40 milliliters per kilogram of body weight, so that you have that as a handy reference. Some tips to stay hydrated. Every time you eat a meal, drink 2 to 3 cups, like measurement cups of water. So that comes out to about 16 to 24 ounces. If you forget to drink water often, set timers and alarms to remind you to drink water. Put it in your calendar wherever you're going to see it. Put a sticky note on your desk of like, hey, grab that water. Include plenty of fruits and veggies with high water content, especially raw ones. Raw fruits and veggies are going to have more water content in them than your cooked ones. You cook out a lot of the water if you're cooking them, but including things like cucumbers, bell peppers, stuff like that, those are going to have a really high water content in them. Include other beverages throughout the day like tea, coffee, or 100% juice. I would dilute the juice, otherwise your carb count is going to be through the roof. And it's because it's got a lot of sugar in it. Not necessarily bad all the time. Sometimes it's fine. But making sure that you're doing that with coffee and tea. Be careful with caffeine consumption. You don't want to over-caffeinate. Over-caffeination is actually going to kind of deter your hydration needs, but a little bit here and there is going to be helpful with coffee. Black is going to be non-caloric. Same with tea. If you're not putting any sugar or milk in it, there's no calories in that too. Herbal teas could be a really great way to hydrate, especially if it's cold outside. A lot of times tea is just kind of nice because it's warm. So if you're not wanting to drink because you're cold, drinking some tea can be really nice. Add water into smoothies for like a recovery snack or a meal. Smoothies make a really great breakfast, and you can sneak in some hydration as well as some really great fruits and veggies. And then carry a water bottle that you're excited to use. Um, it makes a world of a difference in my water consumption if I carry around a cup with a straw than if I carry around my giant hydro flask. I don't drink out of my hydro flask because it's huge. I pour my hydro flask into my cup with a straw because I'm more likely to drink out of my cup with a straw. So, if that's something that you notice that you're not drinking because you're annoyed at opening your water bottle or it's heavy to carry around, carry like a shaker cup or a cup with a straw or something like that so that you're more likely to drink water. Our One of our last skills here is to regulate eating behaviors. So we're going to talk about how to eat slowly and mindfully, learning to recognize your hunger cues and fullness cues, and normalizing and routinizing eating habits. So, how do we practice good eating behaviors? Our first step is going to be to eat slowly and mindfully. So, when we slow down our food, it helps us to recognize when we're full or still hungry. It helps us to enjoy our food more as well. So, a lot of times we rush through meals. We we sit down, and especially at work, we sit down and we're just like, we gotta eat. A lot of times we maybe don't even sit down. I'm guilty of this all the time, right? I stand, you all probably see me in my office, shoving food in my mouth as I'm standing and working. And so uh, taking time to intentionally sit down and enjoy your meal, really notice how your food tastes, how it feels. It sounds a little fluffy, and that's okay. It's a really helpful tool. When you sit down at dinner, try to set down your fork or your spoon, whatever you're eating with, between every bite. That's a really good way to do it. Intentionally make sure that you sip on your water between bites, to make sure that you're just like slowing down that process. Engaging conversation with someone. Those are all going to be ways that help us slow down. And when we slow down, we recognize, oh, I'm full. I don't need to eat more. And it gives our body a chance to catch up so that we don't overeat. So just by slowing down, we can actually reduce the number of calories if we're trying to lose weight. We need to learn to recognize our physiological hunger and fullness cues. So eating slowly and mindfully is going to support that. But a lot of times we forget how to recognize when we're hungry, dehydrated, or full. So we have to retrain our body and our brain to work together again. So we do that by slowing down. We do that by tracking calories for at least a short period of time. Some people may need to do it longer. And we do that by intentionally pausing and asking ourselves. So if you were to just pause for a second, take a deep breath. How hungry are you right now? Are you ready for a meal? Are you pretty full? When was the last time you ate? If you had to gauge your hunger, where would you put yourself? Think about your last meal. How full were you, percentage wise, when you finished eating? In general, if we are trying to lose weight, shooting for 80% full is a really good target for weight loss. It takes about 15 minutes for our body to really process how much food we've had. And so, if we are eating to 100% full, we're going to overeat. We need to give ourselves time to slow down and to recognize how much food is actually hitting our stomach. So we want to normalize and routinize eating habits. So it's important to start to recognize if we eat when we're bored, stressed, sad. What are those triggers that force us to eat? So practicing recognizing those emotions and the nutritional choices that you tie to them can be a really important tool for helping to normalize your eating habits. If you forget to eat, practice setting timers or reminders to eat. Plan to have nutritious options available to you throughout the day. If you forget to eat, pack a lunch, put it on your desk, put it where you'll see it. Make sure that you eat your lunch before the end of the day. Even if you plan to eat at 11 and you end up eating at 2, make sure you eat that lunch. And then make sure that you're scheduling time to shop and to meal prep. So some tips to avoid overeating are to drink water or calorie-free beverages with meals. By calorie-free, I mean more on that like coffee, tea end, without sweeteners. Um, not 0 calorie flavored drinks. Those processed ones have a lot of junk in them. Try using smaller plates and utensils to help control portions. If you compare plates from the 50s and 60s to our plates today, they are huge. And like spoon size, there is massive difference. So use a smaller plate if you know that you overeat. Measure your cups and your bowls so you know how much you're eating. A lot of times we're like, oh yeah, I ate a serving of cereal, but like, did we actually measure out the serving of our cereal or did we just like fill the bowl? Um, if your guys' bowls are anything like mine at home, our bowls are huge. So make sure that you know how much your things hold that you use frequently, so that way you can make sure that your portion sizes are appropriate because we typically tend to fill the plate or the bowl. It's satisfying to our eyes to fill that plate or bowl, and so make sure that you know kind of how much it is so that you're not overeating because you're just trying to fill your plate or bowl. This one is really hard, um, but do your best to turn off electronics and sit down at a table. Try not to sit in front of the TV. Try not to be on your phone. Engage in conversation with someone. If you live by yourself, like uh, put on some music or something like that so that you are focused on your food. Challenge yourself to notice things about your food, like how does it taste? Come up with 3 or 4 descriptor words of your food intentionally and really notice that to help slow you down and not be so distracted. When we're distracted and we eat, we overeat. Set a 15-minute timer to help slow down and feel when you're full. So when you think that you're about 80% full, stop eating, set a 15-minute timer. When that 15-minute timer goes off, if you are still hungry, then you can eat a little bit more. If not, you may say, hey, I feel pretty full. I think I'm good. And then you can put away your leftovers. And then fill half of your plate with nutrient-dense foods like fruits and vegetables. So again, those have lots of fiber. They're going to help you feel full. They're going to slow things down in your digestive tract. And so those are going to help you naturally eat less calories because your belly's going to feel like it's got stuff in it. And then the last thing we're going to touch on is supporting sleep but with your nutrition. Um, so just some quick things on that. When we are thinking about nutrition around our sleep, we want to avoid eating large meals prior to sleeping. The more and more research that comes out says that it's okay to eat a meal within a couple hours before bedtime, but you do want to avoid eating like a giant meal before bedtime, especially if your stomach is really sensitive. Some of this is going to be individual. If you notice that your stomach feels kind of crampy if you eat and then try to lay down, then don't eat within a couple hours before bedtime. If you know that you can lay down pretty quickly, it's fine to eat a normal size meal and then lay down. For me, on the nights that I get home late, if I get home between 6:30 and 7, and then I'm waking up early, so I'm going to bed around 8:30, I'm eating within 2 hours of bedtime, and that's okay. I know how much I can eat and what I can eat without giving myself an upset tummy. Caffeine, limit it 6 hours prior to sleep. Caffeine has a really long half-life, so make sure that you are limiting that before sleep. Alcohol will absolutely mess up your sleep. It destroys your REM cycle. I'm sure Doc Brown will talk about that in her sleep presentation. So make sure if you're gonna have alcohol, do your best. I know it's not always possible, but do your best to limit it 3+ hours before sleep. There is like a dose response. I mean, any alcohol is gonna be detrimental to your sleep, but being reasonable with your alcohol is going to give you the best chances at uh, maintaining good sleep. And then large amounts of liquid right before you sleep, you want to avoid those. That way you don't have to go to the bathroom. Obviously, if you down a whole bunch of water right before you get into bed, you're gonna have to get up and pee, and that's gonna disturb your sleep. Some things to try to help support your sleep are sipping on chamomile or like a sleepy time tea, which most of the sleepy time teas are chamomile based. Chamomile is one of the most researched supplements to support sleep and is very, very effective. So including chamomile can be really helpful. I'm a big fan of the honey vanilla chamomile from Celestial Seasonings. It adds a little bit of sweetness without me having to add a bunch of honey myself and increase the sugar content. Um, Regular chamomile I can handle, but some people don't enjoy. So that might be a good alternative. There's some really good ones that have like a little bit of like a minty flavor to them too. A recovery snack like mixing tart cherry juice and Greek yogurt or walnuts can be really helpful. Tart cherry has some research that shows that it decreases inflammation as well as oxidative stress. And so if you mix that in with the Greek yogurt, not a lot, you just need a little bit, then you're getting the added benefit of the protein plus the healthy fats, and then that reduction in the inflammation and oxidative stress from the tart cherry. So don't down a bunch of juice because it's sugary. It's gonna jack you up if you're loaded up on sugar. But just a little bit of that mixed in with the protein from the Greek yogurt can be really helpful. Walnuts are naturally rich in melatonin, so those can be a really helpful pre-bed snack as well. Including things like salmon and eggs regularly in your evening meals are going to be helpful to boost omega-3s as well as melatonin. And then dark leafy vegetables are going to help with magnesium. Magnesium is really helpful for relaxing your body. So those are going to be good ways to boost some good sleep habits through your nutrition. So to sum up, it's really important that you identify why your nutrition matters to you. How are you going to let what you value, so how are you going to let your why inform your action? So as you think back through all that we talked through today, sorry, I know this was a long one, maybe preparing well stood out to you, or maybe you know that your protein intake is really low, maybe your health is really important, or you know that your hydration needs work. Whatever that is for you as you went through and you're like, ooh, that put on a light bulb for me. Um, Identify how that's going to inform your actions this week and let us know. We'd love to hear from you. All right, guys, have a great one.